Hey guys, what's up? Gizchina here, and today I'm going to be reviewing the Vernee Mars smartphone. It is a mid-range smartphone from China with very slim bezels. Vernee is a pretty new smartphone brand, but they create very good smartphones and I don't expect anything less from the Vernee Mars. It has a Helio P10 processor, 4GB of RAM, and a 1080p screen, all for about $200, rising to $250 after the pre-sale price. However, at this price range, there are actually better options, for example the Xiaomi Redmi Note 4 with the Helio X20 processor but 2GB of RAM. So let's see if this smartphone is a buy or don't buy. Vernee has gone high-end with the build quality of this phone, and it definitely pays off. It's made out of a single block of aircraft-grade aluminum, and it feels and looks very good. Oh, and this is the most compact 5.5-inch phone I've used, period. And this is due to the very small side bezels, as well as the pretty small top and bottom bezels, which make this phone an extremely compact 5.5-inch device. On the side you find the buttons, as well as a side-mounted fingerprint sensor, more on that later, and on the top and the bottom you find the iPhone-like antenna bands. However, I don't believe they copied the iPhone, because both these phones were actually released at around the same time. On the back it's pretty standard, you have the camera, the flash, as well as the Vernee logo. Overall, I'm extremely pleased with the build quality and the size of the smartphone. The one thing I will say is that the metal is very easily scratched, so you probably should use the included case in the smartphone. There's a decent 1080p in-cell display with good colors and good saturation, and stuff generally looks good on the display. It gets pretty bright at 500 nits of brightness, which makes it easy to see in direct sunlight, and there aren't many reflections from the screen either. Gorilla Glass 3 protects the screen as well, but I still do recommend using a case because those thin side bezels probably won't do much to protect the glass from shattering if you drop the phone. The back-firing speakers output some decent volume. It doesn't match up to the very best, but it's definitely loud enough. What really surprised me was speaker quality. These are one of the better speakers I've heard in smartphones. Audio is crisp and there's a surprising amount of bass as well. Here's some sample audio for you to listen to. There's a pretty standard sized battery here, so I'm not expecting insane battery life, but I'm expecting battery life that's at least average, and here it pretty much is. I was able to get roughly 4 hours of screen on time over a 16-hour day with about 2% left. Definitely not the best, but not the worst either. I did the web browsing test and the phone died after 7 hours, I did the video playback test and it died after 8 hours. There is also fast charging in this phone, which should be able to pump up your phone to about 60% in about an hour if you so desire. Light and medium users should be fine, but heavy users will need to fast charge before the end of the day in order to get you throughout an entire day without dying. We have Android 6.0 Marshmallow installed on the Vernee Mars, and Vernee is one of the few manufacturers that chooses to keep their ROM as stock as possible, and that is something I definitely appreciate. Sure, it might not have as many features as other frameworks like MIUI or EMUI, but that's a trade-off I'll gladly make. Even then, Vernee has added a few important functions to this phone, namely the side-mounted fingerprint sensor. Some of the Sony Xperia phones come to mind, but that's about it. This one works very well though. It's super fast and it's also very accurate. In fact, it's one of the fastest fingerprint sensors I've used so far, but there's a caveat to that. When you touch a sensor when the phone is sleeping, then it's actually slower than usual, which is kind of weird. Because this is side mounted, you want to make sure to scan the tips of your fingers as well, because it's difficult to fully place your finger on the fingerprint sensor when it's lying on the table. The phone multitasks extremely well because of the 4GB of RAM, and opening and closing apps is very zippy. In fact, this is the fastest Helio P10 phone I've tested, and the credit to that goes to Vernee's software team. They did a great job optimizing here. You can play almost any game on the Play Store on highest, but there are some intense games where you have to bump the resolution down in order to get some good frame rates. I also ran Antutu and got a pretty decent score for a Helio P10, but it still doesn't match up to what you get on a Helio X20. There are only 2 3G bands and 4 LTE bands, which is a real bummer, because now it's not compatible with a lot of networks worldwide. I was able to get 4G LTE on my carrier, and other things like GPS, Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth all work well. I think the weakest part of the phone here is definitely the camera. It captures some pretty good detail, but colors are frequently washed out. You can fix this in post, but that's not something that you should have to do. You can fix this somewhat by focusing on something light in the picture, for example my dog's fur, and you can see that the camera itself compensates by saturating everything else properly. The front-facing camera doesn't contain much detail because it's only a 5-megapixel camera, and the video quality is surprisingly good quality, but the colors are surprisingly okay. So to conclude this review, the Vernee Mars gives you a good screen, good build quality, good sound, and a good software experience. but it does have rather average battery life and a pretty weak camera, and if these are deal breakers, I totally understand. However, it is the most compact 5.5-inch phone I've used so far, and that's definitely a selling point. That being said, do I recommend this phone? And the short answer is no. Not because I think it's a bad phone. In fact, I think Vernee did a great job making the Vernee Mars into a good phone, but at the price point of $200, there are other better options out there, for example the Xiaomi Redmi Note 4. But if you still decide to get this phone anyway, maybe you like the small footprint or the side-mounted fingerprint sensor, apart from the camera, do know that Vernee did a great job making this a good phone for your money. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. I live near the airport, so planes like every 5 seconds.